Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this morning's CADRE webinar on understanding long-term recovery and disaster case management. As you begin to settle in and other folks are joining, I'm going to go ahead at this moment and ask Janet to do our little opening welcome. So Janet, go ahead.
Well, it is such an honor for each and every one of us to be here. And thank you, Marcia, Araceli, and Anna for making this happen. This is so needed at this time. And we felt with the current events occurring right now, if we just invite ourselves and each other to really take a nice deep breath and be here at this amazing session that we have the opportunity to share our resources with. We felt like we wanted to light a candle for Ukraine and all that is going on in that area, for all of the people, for hope and healing, and for our support and love to be sent their way. And so we have a candle here with an origami heart, and it's blue and yellow in Ukrainian colors. So we would just like to light this candle in honor of all people facing disaster, but especially outreach to our Ukrainian people and all people facing war and disruption in their lives. And just so grateful to CADRE for its amazing response. And so as our light goes out, may the light return to you. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Janet. Okay, I would like to go ahead and get us underway with today's program. If we could start with our welcome and introductions and a little bit of housekeeping. If you wouldn't mind, if you could please put your name and organization in the chat box so we can get to know who's on the screen with us. And if you came with a particular question for today's program, by all means, put that in the chat box. We do have a wonderful lineup of speakers and presenters for you this morning. So they're all here with us, and we are excited to get underway with the program. Let's see. In terms of a few of our housekeeping and access issues, if you have any accessibility needs, please let us know. I have my name at the top of your participant list, I believe, with the words access-Anna. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat, or if you're struggling and you need to unmute to ask, please raise your hand and we'll do our best to assist you. We are running 2 accessibility features. The Zoom live transcript is running, which allows you to have subtitles across the bottom of your screen. You can toggle those on or off if you would like to have those running. We also have in Zoom, you can have the live transcript running kind of like a separate chat box. We are also running Otter AI, which is a separate browser window as well for a transcript option. A note, we are recording today's session, and so that is to allow for folks who have registered and might have had a last-minute schedule change, or others who are interested in this topic at a later date to be able to take advantage of today's program. We do ask, if you do speak aloud, if you wouldn't mind turning on your video camera when you are speaking, just so we can see who we're talking with, and we can put some names and faces together. So with that, why are we here today? Today's topic is on understanding long-term recovery, and more specifically, disaster case management and what that is. So what I have for you on screen are a couple of our session objectives for this morning. We hope that through today's program, you'll be able to gain a better understanding, or a broad understanding, of long-term recovery according to how our national organization, voluntary organizations active in disaster, how National VOAD views disaster case management and where that fits in the spectrum of services. to understand the differences between what some of you may be engaged in, which is day-to-day case management services, and how that might be different following an emergency or a disaster, and then to explore how case management services are handled here in Santa Clara County. We have a wonderful set of speakers to share some experiences with you. And then finally, to learn about a new tool that CADRE has been working with, what it is. It's called Vision Link, what it is, and how we hope it can be used in the future for any types of disasters or emergencies in Santa Clara County. And so with that, I'm going to take a quick scan in our chat box. I don't see any questions in there. If you've joined us a few minutes late, we are asking if you'll put your name and organization in the chat box so we're all familiar with who's logged in today. And I will continue on with this morning's program. What do we have planned for you? We're wrapping up our introductions and why we're all here. I have a couple of slides to run through some information with you on understanding long-term recovery according to the VOAD model. We've got the three speakers that we've lined up. We're going to talk about Vision Link, and lastly, we hope to spend some time talking as a group about planning for disaster recovery in Santa Clara County, in particular, disaster case management services. And so with that, I will keep going. So long-term recovery, what do we know from our national organization? Long-term recovery is the period following a disaster in which an affected community works to establish what's sometimes called the new normal. Oftentimes, a cooperative body or a new group will emerge if there is a larger scale emergency that requires a lot of coordination amongst a number of different service providers. That is sometimes formed in something called a long-term recovery group. That's that LTRG acronym you see on your screen, or the other acronym is an LTRO, a long-term recovery organization. Either one of those is often formed in larger events that works to assist individuals and families as they work to recover from that particular event. The goal of long-term recovery is to unite recovery resources with community needs. And so basically, it's always to figure out how do we work with some of our most vulnerable community members in assisting them, connecting them with various resources that are sometimes confusing and difficult to find. So it's usually, a long-term recovery group is usually established by the community. Sometimes there is outside assistance that comes in to help a local community to do that. We have some really wonderful national organizations who it is their mission to help and assist with long-term recovery getting stood up. And I think one of the things I want to point out at this point is, when we use the words long-term recovery, depending on what organization you're coming into this conversation with, we sometimes are thinking different things. And so in the nonprofit VOAD sector, long-term recovery is about helping individuals and families recover, not as those words are sometimes defined in government. Long-term recovery often focuses on infrastructure needs, economic impacts, maybe the business sector, the private sector. In VOAD, when we call out long-term recovery, we're very focused on individuals and families and helping them to recover to whatever their new normal may become. And so in terms of organizing a long-term recovery group, we have some really wonderful resources at the national level. And actually, for this morning's program, I have uploaded some handouts to the CADRE events training calendar that you can either click over on a separate web browser screen while you're listening this morning, or you can go ahead and download those after today's program. But I did put up a few resources as handouts for today. let's see. I'll continue on. So often and typically in large events, as I was talking about a long-term recovery group or a long-term recovery organization forming, it oftentimes will look at these different bullet points and standing up committees or resources that will target these specific areas. Disaster case management is just one of them. If we have large scale disasters, thinking about things like our wildfires up north in past years, there's construction management to help folks rebuild their homes. There's oftentimes needs for someone to step forward in volunteer management, donations management, spiritual or emotional care resources. And all along this way, obviously there's needs to assist with financial reporting and tracking of the various resources that come into play in assisting a community. So I want to move us forward into the specific of disaster case management and do a little bit of some definition of terms. Disaster casework is a little bit different than disaster case management. Disaster casework is oftentimes what you'll see in the relief phase of an emergency. It's early intervention that's done by skilled helpers. It's really focused around information and referral and linking folks in the immediate kind of short term right after an event is kind of still unfolding or still happening. People may be in shelters, they may be in temporary or transitional housing, and it's linking survivors with services and resources for their immediate or short-term anticipated needs. Disaster case management is when we kind of move into that transition for the longer period of recovery, and it's really one of the most critical functions in long-term recovery. It's defined by National VOAD as a time-limited process where we have a very, there's kind of a whole field of disaster case management, and we have skilled helpers that work individually with disaster affected clients and families to help them plan for and achieve their own individual goals around recovery. It extends beyond the relief and kind of urgent needs phase. So I just wanted to kind of lay that out for folks, and what we always hope for is what's called kind of a warm handoff, that those organizations that are doing the initial disaster casework, sometimes those are Red Cross, maybe Salvation Army, maybe Zucchi Foundation that are doing some initial casework, will do a warm handoff to whatever organization stepped forward in a local community to embrace the leadership and management of disaster case management services for the longer term recovery. So what are some of the key elements of disaster case management? As we head into the recovery phase, it involves outreach to the community of survivors or impacted folks. It involves a much more robust screening and intake process and an assessment of disaster recovery needs. Then again, as I said, working with the families and the individuals to actually help them plan their recovery, kind of stage out their action and work through things, help to work with them on advocacy as needed to match resources with their needs, and then kind of walking that journey alongside a disaster impacted community member in helping them to go through the longer term recovery process. This is oftentimes something that lasts 12 months, 18 months, it can go on for years, depending on the size, scale, and impact of a disaster, which eventually leads to a case closure when folks have been able to successfully achieve the plans that were set out with their case manager. So disaster case managers, who are they? What are the skill sets that are involved? They serve as a primary point of contact in helping to help disaster impacted families access and coordinate services. They help with what is oftentimes a very complex set of verifications and accessing services, help to establish kind of a new normal. And they have specialized knowledge and skills on disaster recovery resources, advocacy, case presentation, the things you're seeing on your screen, a whole host of really specific skill sets that disaster case managers focus on. The personnel that do this, they could actually be employees or volunteers. There are some real kind of principles around how you work with the clients after a disaster and emergency, which are probably very consistent with those of you who do day-to-day case management, respecting clients' right to privacy, keeping in confidential client information, being, kind of protective of that and sensitive to that. And so there are a number of organizations within our VOAD network that specialize in these services, and we have some of them wonderfully in our own Santa Clara County area that are going to share some thoughts and experiences with you all today. So these disaster case management organizations have a mission that's consistent with this type of work. They are committed to coordinating, not duplicating resources, to the sharing of information and helping facilitate kind of a cross sharing of information to help an individual or family with their continuum of care. All of this work is designed to complement the work of government and other community-based organizations and helping folks to overcome any barriers. The last bullet line is, around being consistent with our national VOAD guidance and POC. That's a short acronym that stands for Points of Consensus. At the national level, we have in our organization for each of those bullet points that talk about volunteer management, donations management, disaster case management, there are individual kind of guidance documents that the organizations that do this work day in, day out, and are committed to this have all agreed to some points of consensus. And I have loaded that to today's program if you'd like to download that and see that more specifically on what are the national points of consensus focused on disaster case management. And with that, I think I'd like to get us into the speakers that we've lined up for you this morning. We have asked a couple of folks from within our Santa Clara County community to share with you some of their experiences in working with individuals and families that have experienced actually some very different disasters and emergencies in, I would say maybe the last 3 to 5 years or so. What were some of the lessons learned in their work in doing disaster case management? Any tips or guidance that they'd want to offer up to us all as future planning considerations and opportunities for us to strengthen our local community's work in this arena? And so with that, I think I would like to introduce our first speaker. We're going to go in alphabetical order. Marie, you get to be first. And so Marie Bernard is the Executive Director of Sunnyvale Community Services, where she leads an over $11 million agency with 40 dedicated staff and over 2,500 volunteers. For those of you who may not be as familiar with Sunnyvale Community Services, they were founded in 1970 as a nonprofit agency, serving as a safety net for the community's most vulnerable residents. They help more than 10,000 clients a year with basic needs, including rental assistance, healthy food, case management services, and referrals to benefits. With that, Marie, thank you for joining us today, and the floor is yours.
Okay. Do you want me to, I can share my slides if you want.
You're welcome to do that if you'd like to drive yourself. I do have them loaded in the master deck.
I think I can do it here. Okay, that way. All right,
awesome.
good. So can you see this? Okay. All right. Are you able to see my some slides? Okay, good.
We are good. Thank you.
Well, as Anna said, we are one of the we're a safety net agency here in Santa Clara County, and in fact, let me go up here. We are one of the emergency assistance agencies. There are 7 of us across all the zip codes in Santa Clara County. For some of our programs and services, we cover all the zip codes in Sunnyvale and Alviso. In other parts of our work, we cover Santa Clara County with a no wrong door policy to help people with food and assistance, and also connection to benefits. So the story that we have is back in 2016. So at that point, there was a fire in the Twin Pines Manor apartment complex in Sunnyvale. 94087 zip code, a very relatively wealthy zip code in Silicon Valley, but we found out that this was a de facto moderate to low income apartment complex. We found that out by looking at what happened with the fire, which happened on April 15th. I got a call from our mayor and other city council members informing me of the fire, which made all the news. It was a complex of 70 different units. And in one day, all of those individuals, originally it was estimated to 110 people. That's what the landlord officially said were living there. But in fact, there was 169 people squeezed into studio and 1-bedroom apartments. So 80% of the individuals there were low to extremely low. Many of them were already our clients. So in one day, we found that 169 people who had been housed became unhoused, which was pretty dramatic. The entire complex had to be red tagged because of pre-existing conditions, as well as the fact that the structure of the apartments meant that all of the egresses were blocked, and there had been a lot of water damage. So the city set up a emergency shelter at the senior center, which I went to the following morning. And I walked in and saw that we had our public safety officers, just about everybody who worked at the city in administrative function was there. The Red Cross was there because they were those original emergency assistance folks who were called in to do the immediate disaster help. And then there was myself. I had a staff who was not working on a Saturday normally, and I worked with the city manager, with Sunnyvale Public Safety, and our staff to try to put together a plan for us to take over case management the following Monday. So we were that case management agency that Anna spoke about before. We had never done anything like this, and in fact, this was a national incident because I don't think there's a lot of incidents in Santa Clara County where 169 people suddenly become homeless. And so it was very, very dramatic. And it was unprecedented for us as well. We had worked with the Red Cross before. We certainly knew how to work with public safety. Our public safety in Sunnyvale uniquely has our officers are all trained in fire, police, and EMT. I will say that I know just anecdotally that some of the people who were in that, who might have perished in that fire, were saved because the first people on site were police officers who put on their fire gear that was in their trunk. They ran over there and they rescued people from the second floor. So we're a very tight-knit community in Sunnyvale. And so the mayor had me on speed dial. We had staff who were on site on Monday morning at the senior center, and we started doing the intakes, as we would call it, to try to get a handle on finding out who everybody was. We got the information. It was fairly limited information from the Red Cross, who were feeding us the information that they had. And again, that number of people estimated kept growing because we found that there were 3 people. There was one case where I believe there were 8 people living in a 1-bedroom apartment. And so we were dealing with not just the trauma of the fire, but the trauma of people who had already been living on the edge. This became the biggest thing that Sunnyvale had ever seen. And so we plugged in to the CADRE system, which I found extremely unwieldy, at being very blunt, because I was in the center of these meetings and they kept saying, what do you need and what are your plans? And here I am, an emergency assistance agency, and people were saying, well, what are you going to be doing about this? What are you going to be doing about that? And I said, I'm putting one foot in front of the other. That was actually a lot of stress for us to try to coordinate or answer all these questions. And finally, I told city public safety, I can't do this. I have to do the work that we know how to do. We're writing this book as we go. I can't try to then coordinate and give people 40-page plans. We don't have those, but we're going to do what we know how to do. And so we reached out to the community. The city immediately granted us $150,000. We eventually raised nearly $900,000 for this emergency because of the magnitude and the focus. We did not add any staff, but we also quickly found out who our allies were and our partners. Because I went to a meeting 2 days later of CEOs of all sorts of nonprofits. And I said, we've got this big fire. A couple of people said, oh, well, we'll give you some names of people to talk to. But the people who raised their hands and said, we are going to assign staff. I said, we need case managers. We don't have that. I can't just immediately hire people. And four or five of our sister agencies said, I'm assigning a full-time case manager to you, who helped operate all of the hotel rooms because we had to move people from the shelter to hotel rooms. One of our sister, that was Downtown Streets team. We had somebody managing that every day, and this was a 7-day-a-week project for at least the first month. The second was West Valley Community Services, who covers west part of Santa Clara County. They said, we will help, we have housing and we'll help case manage some of the larger families. And then our sister agency at CSA in Mountain View said, we will help case manage seniors who are in need of special services. And then Abode Services said, we have temporary transitional housing. We'll assign you some of those units. And then the city of Sunnyvale said, what do you need? And then we called the Community Foundation. We let the media know. The county of Santa Clara matched the city with funding. So we knew that it was going to take a lot of money. And then we knew what to do with it. And most of that money, almost all of it, went to rental assistance and also other emergency needs for the families. We learned that it was that partnership that really worked. We also, and this took, as you can see, about 6 months, which was miraculous. But the difference between housing people who had been housed the day before and housing chronically homeless people was also markedly very different in our experience. So we were taking people who were traumatized, but also who had jobs, were struggling, but somehow making it or staying housed. And I have to say that almost all these families came back and said they were better off afterwards because we got them into safer housing. We got them into more affordable housing. We worked with the landlords of where they were going to be moving. And we also learned that perhaps the CADRE model to plug into it 5 years ago or so was way too unwieldy for us. But again, this was very concentrated in Sunnyvale, where we know everybody. We had everybody on Rolodex, and we said we were going to do what we said we were going to do. And we have built tremendous friendships and relationships with the Red Cross, with public safety. We did have a number of learnings. We had another fire in 2019. It wasn't as big, but we learned about the fire from clients. We weren't called by public safety. We weren't called by the Red Cross, but people started coming into our office saying, I just lost my home. This locale, what looked like, I thought, a third world country in the middle of Silicon Valley. It was stuck in a corner by one of those retaining walls near a highway. I had no idea this apartment complex existed. A few of them were already our clients. 51 low-income residents were stuck into 11 one-bedrooms or studios. And I was there when our city walked through it. They had all the departments there. They red tagged it because of pre-existing conditions. So again, this was unveiling this underbelly of terrible conditions people are living in Silicon Valley, which was shocking. We took what we had learned 3 years before. We proactively worked with city staff, with Project Sentinel and the Law Foundation, and we said we have to work immediately on resolution with this landlord. And at the end, we negotiated a deal with the landlord so that the tenants got a settlement besides everything else that we were able to do. And we were able to successfully house everybody again. So we added to our repertoire, proactively doing partnerships with our legal partners in this situation. And again, what was shocking to us, though, was we didn't learn about this from the folks that we had been working with. You know, we had all this deep connection with public safety and with Red Cross, and it was the clients walking in. So this was a breakdown that we still see of how do you get people to say, if it's in Sunnyvale, at least call our agency. Don't just give out a phone number. People in a fire are in shock when they've lost their home, and they're just worrying about where am I going to stay tonight, and then they lose connection. They may have lost their phone. They may have moved in for a couple of days with their aunt in Fresno. Well, how do we get them connected back? So I see that there's a breakdown in the immediate help with the early responders to agencies like us who would step in to be the case managers in the long term. So that's one of the learnings that we have. We've had other, that same year in 2016, there was another fire with 20 people. We had excess funds, and I called the funders and made sure that we could use it for the other fire. We were able to. And then we've also were asked to help with the San Jose flood. We collected gift cards and funding, which we gave then to Catholic Charities and Sacred Heart, because we knew our community wanted to help. And then finally in 2020, we learned that relearned the knowledge that people who are encamped who are homeless for 20 years, 25 years in some cases, are not the same population and have much deeper needs. We were asked by our city to manage moving people from the encampment out of the park this is in the middle of the pandemic in 2020, and to manage that whole process, to move them into hotels and manage transitional hotel stays. And we said, that's a bridge too far for us. We are not trained in operating temporary shelters. That's not what we do. And so, and it was in the middle of the pandemic. No one was doing anything. We reached out to our sister agencies. The city of Sunnyvale needed to do they were doing repairs on a park, so it wasn't safe for people to be encamped there. But the county was saying, don't move anybody from an encampment. Our city was standing there going, why aren't you doing this? And finally, our sister agency at Home First blinked and said, we will operate a transitional or a temporary hotel program. And then we came in as their strong support arm. So we said, we'll do everything that we know how to do to support the people, but you are going to operate this program. They showed me their list of policies and procedures, and I said, I don't have one of those. I don't have policies and procedures of how to deal with no weapons on the site and all sorts of other things, and how to screen people to be in this program. And so that's where, again, we learned what some of the limits were, but the program was very successful. It took about a year, and every one of those individuals, all 31, were offered and were able to have longer term housing options for themselves, which was amazing. And we know we played an important part, but we didn't lead it. So anyway, so those are some of the learnings. Again, I think that there's a broken link between the initial responders and places like us, because there are fires frequently in our communities, and we only hear about them anecdotally, and we're constantly reaching out to public safety saying, call us, let us know. be aggressive about, or, oh, I guess not aggressive, but proactive about saying, on day 3, you're not going to have a hotel room from the Red Cross. What are your plans? Please call Sunnyvale Community Services so that we can help them, because they just kind of evaporate after that. And the Red Cross is also volunteers, and they're not as proactive as we'd like for them to refer people to us.
Okay, well, thank you, Marie, for all of that, thoughtful and insightful information and the experiences that you've had as of late. Our next speaker is Araceli Gonzalez with Catholic Charities, and Araceli is the Program Director of Disaster Services, and she did a lot of work around the 2017 San Jose flood experience, along with quite a huge role she played as well for Catholic Charities during COVID and pandemic food distribution. But related to disaster case services and case management, Araceli, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna. Marie, thank you so much for sharing. A lot of things that Marie was sharing, we kind of went through the same things with the floods. So I'll start off first with the floods of 2017. You have families, if there's a fire, there's a flood, there's a disaster in some kind of sort, it does matter where that person is staying. When you have families that there's multiple families in one home, some families are paying rent, $300, $400, and they get displaced from one day to another. And helping those people get placed back into a home for that same amount of rent, it's very difficult. The 2017 floods, we worked alongside with the landlords to rebuild what was needed. We worked with some families, were displaced, and then we put them in different areas alongside with the city. The city came in. We had several apartment buildings that offered, they could stay for 6 months. But as we have been working with disasters for quite some time now, when it comes to flood and to fires, the turnaround time for a recovery, it could be up to 2 years, whether it's mentally, whether it's putting a person back into where they need to be to move forward, the recovery part. That is something that, I'm not going to share too much on information that like Marie had mentioned. She covered a lot of things that, every single disaster goes through. The families getting placed, we have families getting placed in a better location now because they were working. And then we had those, families that were just struggling. In the 2017 floods, we also dealt with a lot of seniors. I want to say about 70% of them were seniors. And dealing with seniors and the culturally, when you're dealing with a disaster, you have to work with the cultural that they're in. Some cultures, they do not believe in mental health. They do not believe in services. They don't want to get services in that kind of way. So we as Catholic Charities, we had to work on recovery. Once we placed them, we've had to work on recovery. So we started working alongside with them culturally, what would work for the families to get together, pre-pandemic, of course, get together and talk about what they went through. We had a lot of families that what they used to do a lot was planting, whether it was vegetable planting or just plant planting. Planting is a therapy in a lot of people's lives. So what we did is we actually did a workshop and had discussions. And in those discussions, we were talking about plants and we were talking about the soil and different things. And it turned out that half of the people that were in there they started opening up. And we took it in a different direction. And we asked them, just to share a little bit, how they wanted to feel, because they felt they're in an environment of where they were pre the disaster. That they felt a lot more comfortable and they were able to open up. And then from there, they started getting groups together, and they would get together and talk about their plants or talk about other things. So we had to really focus on what was going to work on case management for these clients. Case management, what we're seeing, takes about 2 years of just following through. So, like Marie said, again, you have to work with all your resources that you do have. Case management, when it does come through FEMA, it's just covering just the case management part. It doesn't cover any kind of assistance. It doesn't cover anything that has to do with monetary. And we know that here in Santa Clara County, or Silicon Valley, it takes monetary to help a lot of these families to recover and to get where they need to be. Sometimes if we make a plan to, we're going to make an assessment on a client, and we're going to try to move forward for that client, and we're trying to give them steps. Sometimes those clients are just thinking about tomorrow. And how are we going to be working with those clients on giving an assessment for 6 months from now when they're barely thinking about tomorrow? So that's certain things that we have to take in consideration when we're working with clients. I also wanted to talk about the SEU fire. So the SEU fire is a little bit different. As you can see behind me, my team, it was in the middle of COVID. So you have a rural area where we had to go up there. In this area, we have no connections, no cell phone connections. We went out there with walkie-talkies with a couple of different organizations, with Red Cross. We actually, thanks to Marcia and Anna, we connected another Catholic Charities agency, and we had to work with, like Marie said, partnerships. But at this point, now we had to work with partnerships that were in Modesto area, in Stockton area, different areas, because you have to work where the fires are, where the disasters are. So we've been partnering up with different people in Stockton to help the families, and then also getting funding to help some families. FEMA came in and they declared it a disaster. But when FEMA comes in and declares a disaster, they declare a disaster for disaster case management to assist. But we're still having to work with the funding, try to get the resources, what we can do. And when you're given the direction, oh, you shouldn't go up to any of those sites because of the fact that you might be shot if you go to certain sites, what other resources can you do? So we definitely had to think outside the box for this one, because it's not like a fire that was, downtown San Jose or in a neighborhood where we can go. It took us 2 hours every time we go up to see a client. It takes us about 2 hours to go up there and see the client. We have no reception, so we do everything that we do for case management. Check in when we know where we're going to lose reception. We check in when we come back down. We have walkie-talkies. There's always a pair. And one thing that we've been doing with the SEU fire is we've been communicating with FEMA that, if an organization is dealing with certain fires out in areas like this, we do have to have a vehicle that can travel in these areas. I just went out last week to another person's house, and luckily I did have the vehicle that I was able to drive, because when we went out there to do the interview, it was bright and sunny here, and when we got there, it was raining and muddy. And we took rain boots because she let us know, but after a certain area, you lose reception, and Google Maps or different things are not going to work for you. So you have to think outside the box and kind of work with what you have and the partnerships that you can, because you do have some the lightning struck in different areas, and some areas were closer to Santa Cruz. So sometimes it's closer to get connections with Santa Cruz, or sometimes it's closer to get connections with Stockton. So it depends on the disaster. Again, be prepared to work with your organizations. And like how Marie said, you talk to the CEOs and say, this is what I have. Who can help? Who can assist? I know we worked with different organizations and they assisted us as well with case managers. You have to see where's the location, what nationality is there, what language there is, just getting those things prepared, and a simple intake, just having a simple intake, being prepared and getting consent. Because sometimes if Marie comes to me and say, hey, I have all these, but I need to know who it's going to. Well, if I didn't get consent to give her the information, then right there, we're at a loss, because they have the resources, but I can't share until I contact that client. And like Marie said, there was clients that moved away to a sister's, to an aunt's, to a cousin's. They moved away. We had families that we finally, 2 years later, here after the SEU fires, we have families that moved away. They finally received an email because their email was inactive, and for them to get the same email address, because up there it's different. It depends on a person where they're living. And finally, once we confirm that they are a survivor from the SEU fires, then we're able to assist them. But then, and they live in Washington, but they've never been able to come back to get their stuff, whatever was left. It's making those connections right away. One thing that we've met with FEMA, and we've asked them, having groups like this that are already trained. Marie says she didn't have any extra staff. Well, sometimes we don't have extra staff. We have to pivot. We use that word a lot for COVID, the pivot word. Half of my staff that were trained for the COVID, for the flooding, we pivoted and we put up 9 sites for drive-through distributions, and we were serving, 5,000 families in 1 week, and it's just a matter of, making that communication. And, it is, CADRE helped a lot with COVID. When we first started with COVID, that Friday, we were already in meetings. CADRE was already in meetings about, what we were in the EOC, we were in communications. And then when the shutdown happened, okay, resources, we have the staff, like Catholic Charities connected with Second Harvest. And then we started doing the home delivery and started doing everything that we were possibly. What they did is they reached out to all the organizations that needed to be shut down, and we were able to put together what we needed to put together within 24 hours. And all it is just making a couple of phone calls. But in that meeting, when we had CADRE, that's where the city said, okay, here's the connections. Can you do this? Can you do that? And then you have the support. So just being involved with those conversations pre a disaster, I think that's where we get the more information, is being prepared, having intakes already completed. Maybe not the perfect intake, but at least the general intake. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the program that we're using now with CADRE. And I definitely think that, just having that connection, whether it's a platform or it's we have to also think, if everything goes down, do we have paper printouts just to go out there and assist?
Thank you, Araceli. Really good information you shared. Thanks so much. Our last speaker is actually a set of speakers that we're bringing to you. It's Janet Childs and Sue Cronin from Bill Wilson Center for Living with Dying. And so Janet is actually one of our founding CADRE members, and few understand trauma better than Janet and her colleague Sue. For the past 4 decades, Janet herself has been behind the scenes at disasters throughout the Bay Area, helping survivors and victims and first responders regain their bearings in the aftermath of a tragedy. Sue Cronin has 20 years of experience in healthcare technology. She joined what's called the CISM, the Critical Incident Stress Management Team, training in 2012, and has been a volunteer crisis coordinator for over 10 years. Thank you so much, Janet and Sue, for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. It is such an honor to be here. And I'm actually going to give the majority of this presentation to our wonderful Sue, who is the director of our Bay Area Critical Incident Stress Management Team and has been at the lead of several incidents, most recently the VTA mass shooting incident. And so I'm going to give it to you, Sue, and then I'll take it back whenever I feel like I have something to provide.
Thank you, Janet. And thank you for having us here and for everyone participating today. I've had the great privilege of having Janet as my mentor since 2012. So I have learned from the best, and we definitely appreciate our partnership with CADRE and the other agencies across the county. I really think that working together, coordination with other agencies and resources is so critical, especially during times of disasters. I think it's so important for us to be able to touch base and come together during the non-disaster times so that we can continue fostering these relationships and support each other the best way we can when disaster hits. What we're going to focus on today is the response unfortunately, we've had 2 mass casualty events, within the past few years here in the Bay Area, first at the Gilroy Garlic Festival and then at the Valley Transportation Authority. And Janet and I were on the ground with both of those, with many of you as well. So I want to talk specifically today about our efforts with the Valley Transportation Authority and what we have learned through this experience. Janet put this beautiful quote in that not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. And I think that's true day to day, as well as lessons that we can learn as we're going through the disaster response. And as you know, in July of 2019, there was a shooting at the Gilroy Garlic Festival. And then in May 2021 at the VTA Guadalupe Yard. Those events are different in many ways. One, because the Gilroy Garlic Festival was a community-based event, and the second was a workplace event. So the victims, it was a broader group of victims from the Garlic Festival or witnesses that needed support, some not even from the local area. And then at VTA, of course, all of the witnesses were employees, but the ripple effects out from that have been huge, and they are ongoing. In the immediate response for May 26, 2021, Bill Wilson Center, our Critical Incident Stress Management Team, CADRE, Red Cross, Behavioral Services, and others all converged down at 70 West Heading to meet the employees and the families who were arriving shortly after the shooting once they were released from the yard. And then we moved over to the Red Cross on First Street, where unfortunately the victims' families had to wait nearly 12 hours for the notification, for official notification. So right off the bat, we saw that communication process can use some improvement, and we have been working with the county on an ongoing basis to hopefully move forward with lessons learned for if and when we have another mass victimization event like this one. The VTA event had some exacerbating factors that were already existing. For those of you who are not familiar, it was an employee at the Guadalupe Yard who on May 26 came in and shot and killed 9 coworkers and then killed himself on the property. And then on August 18th, one of the witnesses took his own life. So there were actually 10 casualties plus the shooter from this event. The exacerbating factors are that the transportation agency was already dealing with the pandemic and all of those factors being essential workers, bus operators, light rail operators, working through COVID. They also, a few months prior to the shooting, had a cyber attack, which affected their paychecks. So there was already a high level of stress around that. And then what we've learned in working with VTA is that their job stress is incredible. Janet and I work with first responders throughout the community. We provide training for police, fire, dispatchers, EMS on critical incident stress management. And what we realized in working with the operators from VTA is that they are first responders. In fact, they respond before the first responders get there when something happens on the bus or happens on the light rail. And they have been functioning in this way without the support and training that first responders get. And so that was an area that we identified that can help moving forward, you know, beyond the initial disaster response. And we'll talk more about that. Back to the immediate needs after the shooting, one area that we realized we needed right away was a coordinated online calendar, because VTA has 2,500 employees, 4 different yards, the management office and the union hall, and their largest union has 1,500 employees. So if you multiply out the 2,500 employees plus family and friends who were impacted and traumatized by this event, I don't even know what the final number is there, but we needed to be providing a lot of support. They're a 24/7 operation, so we needed counselors on site and available 24 hours a day at the yard. So that was an effort between behavioral services, the Wilson Center, EAP. We pulled down the San Mateo CISM team, and we needed a shared calendar for all of these various individuals and agencies to be able to indicate when and where support would be available. So for lack of a better tool, I just used a Google Sheet and emailed that out. And some people are proficient with those and some are not. So there are some challenges in that, but I realized that it would be really helpful to have some sort of central database or central calendar that multiple agencies and individuals can use when responding to a disaster like that. The other thing that we immediately deployed, of course, was the critical incident stress management and psychological first aid for the witnesses, employees, family members, and the first responders. In addition to the VTA community, we provided support for fire, sheriffs, police, etc. And there was, definitely some crossover where the shooter actually set his own house on fire when he went to the yard to divert some of the responders to his home. And one of the firefighters who went to his home was the brother-in-law of one of the victims at Guadalupe. So there was a lot of crossover between the first responder community and the victims. Our next steps were referrals to ongoing trauma-informed counseling. And I think, as everyone knows, during the pandemic, mental health professionals were in short supply because their schedules were very full. A lot of people were reaching out for mental health support. We found that the existing workers' comp process, CADRE, and EAP were not meeting the needs. So we worked with the county and with VTA to expand the pool of mental health professionals to identify trauma-informed mental health professionals that could provide immediate service instead of having them call Kaiser saying they can get them in 2 months, which is what was happening. So, and not to knock Kaiser, they were just, at maximum capacity. And so we found a need to be able to deploy mental health professionals and expand our reach of mental health professionals, not just in our county, but many of the employees live out of county. And so we were trying to meet the needs of those employees and families who are out of Santa Clara County as well. The next steps were to support employees and family members through various events, gatherings, funerals, to have ongoing support at the rail and bus yards. And the Guadalupe yard employees needed to, once the sheriffs and investigators released the crime scene, they needed to be able to go back in and gather their personal belongings, which were still in the yard. And so we deployed a team of crisis responders and counselors to walk with them back onto the scene of the crime so that they had support as they were going to get their personal belongings from the building.
Then we also had, excuse me, Sue, several gatherings and opportunities for people to do kind of cleansing and releasing of that. And I think that was very important, an opportunity for them to do an action step.
Exactly. And in a way that made sense for them culturally, based on their culture, their religion, their beliefs. And so we tried to provide a variety of different tools and methods for individuals and groups to do that in a way that was meaningful for them. We also identified in specifically a workplace disaster, should we have another, hopefully not, but another workplace mass casualty incident. In addition to providing counseling, we saw the need that an organization needs help with human resources and upper and middle management to deploy disaster policies. And this is where, with throughout the county, I think it's so important for agencies to have the crisis management plan, because during a crisis like this, the existing check boxes don't fit. So people needed time off because of their mental health, and HR was going, well, which box do we check? Because it doesn't fit in any of these boxes for time off. It's not paternity leave, it's not illness. And so there was some conflict created because of that, not because people didn't care, but because they didn't have a disaster plan and processes in place to be able to quickly accommodate the trauma needs of their employees. And so that's something moving forward that I think we definitely, it's a lesson that we want to take forward. And then the goal of stress management, our goal is not to take away the pain or minimize it, but to make meaning from the pain. So we've been working with VTA ongoing. We're planning for the 1-year anniversary event, which is coming up. I think that's here. We had a 6-month remembrance event at the 6 month date. We have worked closely on an ongoing basis with the county and the county supervisors and Senator Cortese, where there's now funding, a state bill which is providing funding, which helped us open a resiliency center, which is at Julian Street. So there is a resiliency center similar to the Gilroy Strong Center. This is for VTA employees and their families to come and receive counseling services. It's just a peaceful space for them to have group chat, individual counseling. We're going to be having various alternative providers there and different educational topics. There's a place out of the yards or their place of employment where they can come and access these resources. We're actually talking with the county about expanding this out eventually throughout the county, because there's such a need, especially through the pandemic, to be able to provide space. And the more that we talk with people and educate them on the importance of acknowledging and expressing what they've gone through and identifying, what they need in action steps, they're learning the importance of that and helping them build resiliency in that way. And we're starting to see the healing through this organization, though it's, everyone's forever changed on May 26th, carrying this forward, but just being able to stand by them in the long term. And I think it's also important to educate the public. I had a brief conversation with someone the other day, and I talked about our ongoing work with VTA, and he said, wow, it's been over 10 months, it's really still on the forefront of people's minds. And I thought, oh, how nice. You've never had a trauma like that in your life, probably, right? But people don't understand it if they haven't been through it. And why are we still working with them on a daily, weekly basis 10 months later? Because this is a marathon. This is so impactful at so many different levels, and it's important to be able to support individuals after fire, after a mass shooting, after any kind of major trauma on an ongoing basis, because the waves of the trauma and loss, it's kind of like a roller coaster coming and going over a period of time. So until they're back to a place of equilibrium and balance, where they have the coping tools to do that themselves, I think it's so important to be able to provide support long term.
And we have found also that as we get towards the year anniversary, so things might have gotten a little bit softer, the response is a little bit lessened, but as we near that year anniversary, we start anticipating it, and it brings it into sharper focus, what happened. and it actually affects us on probably a deeper level. So it's so important to have that continuity of care that Sue is talking about, to have that ongoing warm handoff that we're able to provide them with support, and then also provide them with resiliency tools that go beyond just surviving.
And as Janet says, it's the infinity of giving and receiving. And we're seeing that within the community as well. So not just providing the employees and families with support, but encouraging them to support each other. And it's beautiful to see that happening where, you know, they're providing resources to one another. And as one person's having a hard day, the other one might not be, and they can be each other's support throughout this, but having us, you know, surrounding them so that they know that they're not alone in this and can keep moving forward with ongoing support.
And I would just like to add too that we had started many years ago their own internal critical incident stress management team for VTA called the CIST team, which stands for Critical Incident Support Team, which is their peer support when they have, you know, smaller incidents that might happen to an individual operator or driver. And what we found is that the development of that CIST team, and then having actually mutual aid from AC Transit's CIST team was amazing, because it gave us a chance to be able to mobilize them and, as Sue said, empower them.
Okay, well, thank you so much to Janet, to Sue, to all of our speakers this morning for the incredible wealth of information that you've shared, and also the incredible work that you have done and continue to do in our Santa Clara County community. I do know also that, you know, on today's session, we have a number of you here that have joined that have also touched these events that our speakers panel has shared some thoughts, reactions, lessons learned, opportunities for future growth. And I would encourage you at this time to use the chat box to share any of your thoughts or reactions to what you've heard this morning. If you'd like to speak aloud as well, if you want to raise your hand using your Zoom feature, we'd like to give an opportunity for you to contribute to today's program. And while you're kind of giving some thoughts to what you might want to share with the group, I am going to turn things over to Marcia, CADRE's Executive Director, to share a few thoughts with you and keep moving things forward for us. So Marcia?
Yep, thank you, Anna. Good morning, everyone. Are you going to put the slides back up? Okay.
Yep, go right ahead.
First, a little commercial. That's not the commercial.
Oh, I don't have that one. I'm sorry. I don't have those two slides.
Okay. All right. So commercial. The United Way Bay Area gave CADRE a grant to conduct earthquake safety presentations to underserved communities throughout Santa Clara County. We are currently translating them. We could use help with translating, but the goal is to translate into at least 7 languages, but we'll do as many languages as we have people that want to translate. There's a 45-minute presentation that just has basics about earthquake safety, things that you do for your home and your family, nothing that costs a lot of money, trying to keep it very simple, and also giving information about resources available to undocumented after disasters. So part of the grant is that we have to get 5,000 documented engagements, which means that for every meeting that we're going to have going forward, you're going to hear this commercial, because we need to get to 5,000. And what we're asking you to do is download an app that is now being used by the state of California called My Shake. And the My Shake app, you can get it in the App Store or the Google Play. What it does is it can give you a few seconds of warning before the ground starts shaking in an earthquake. And a few seconds doesn't sound like a lot unless you're on a roof or on a ladder or standing by a big plate glass window. And when you hear that alert, you can get to a safer place. It does have other safety information, which is all in English only at this time. We're hoping that they will translate it, but we're taking all of their information and putting it into translated materials on the CADRE website. So if you could put your zip code, I see people doing that in the chat, then we get to document that we shared it with you, and we want to share it with all of your clients and all of the congregations and everyone. We can do way more than 5,000 with the network that we have. And so I will put in the chat just how to reach out to us if you would like us to do either a Zoom or an in-person presentation to your clients or congregations. And we will be posting recordings of the information and the written materials online so that they will be able to be used by everyone forever. And that's the end of my commercial.
And I'm going to tell you, you already have an offer in the chat box for assistance with an ASL interpretation. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Okay, all right, so on to disaster recovery support. During the 2017 Coyote Creek flood, CADRE was heavily involved. We had coordination meetings. The first one we had, there were, I think, over 80 organizations in the room, FEMA and the state on the phone, City of San Jose in the room giving updates, lots of organizations helping lots of people in the field, way before we had the meeting, because we had the meeting, I believe, on day 3. But each organization was interviewing people. They're sitting down with them, finding out what their needs were, and giving resources, gift cards, gas cards, and other things. So one of the downsides to that model is that the individuals have to keep repeating their story. Maybe that's therapeutic, I'm not sure. I have to ask Janet. But having to repeat themselves over and over can be frustrating when we could create a one-stop shop where everyone could review the story, decide who qualifies for resources, and give them to them in a more timely manner. One of the things that we realized was that there was no way to really know, for all of the organizations that were helping individually, we had no way of knowing if all those in need were getting assistance, if there were people afraid to come forward and ask for assistance, if they were getting equal assistance. And so we recognized that there was a problem. This is not a new problem. It comes up in most disasters where there is no plan in place ahead of time. And San Jose for sure recognized that need, because they really wanted to know how people were being served. And we want to be able to share with the government kind of an aggregate of how people are being served instead of individual organizations showing how they served. That's good too. That's good for you, but it's good for us as the non-governmental community to show the strength and the ability to support that we have. Next slide. So we knew that that was an issue, but we didn't have any money, and we didn't, and so we weren't looking for a solution. San Jose was trying to work something out with a local Silicon Valley tech company to create it, but that didn't happen. And then the fires happened, the fires in Santa Cruz County and Santa Clara County happened. And Santa Cruz County doesn't have a VOAD. And so CADRE offered to help them. And this was far into the event. We were listening early on, but they asked us if we could assist them when we got into long-term recovery, which was, as Araceli said, a year after the fact, and people had scattered all over the place. But they wanted to see if they could find a case management software. We said we would help. So we started interviewing different organizations, and some of the criteria that we use, that they had to understand disaster recovery. Well, the one that we chose, the people that are on their team, besides having some amazing tech people, they have former Red Cross boots on the ground, people that have worked through case management and disasters. There was representation from the National VOAD organization that has supported disasters and from the FEMA recovery team. So they have a ton of expertise to share. They had pre-built templates, very user-friendly, just fill in the blank, and you put all of the case management information up in one place, and anyone with permissions can view it so that any support that's happening for that individual is now showing up in one place. Very user-friendly, and you could customize it. So next slide, one of the customizations that we did. So we chose Vision Link, and Vision Link, it has some major clients, including FEMA's immigrant support, and now I can't think of any, but there is a huge list of all of the big organizations that they support, and they support little organizations too. Next slide. This is the one. So one of the customizations we did is we created a community registration page that can be stood up within minutes after a disaster. We can put a QR code and a website link anywhere, and ask people to identify themselves as being part of the disaster. We ask for their address, we ask what kind of damage, the number of people and pets that were involved. We ask permission, like Araceli said, to share this information with other nonprofits that may have resources for them. Ask for the types of assistance that they need. There's just a bunch of check boxes for different types of thing. And then any other family information. Are there people with access and functional needs? Are there veterans? And so this becomes a database in Vision Link that CADRE owns. And anyone that has signed on as a user can access these records. Now there are organizations that have their own systems. Their information can be uploaded and consolidated with this, so that there are only one client case record for each individual. And it's working really well in Santa Cruz. They've been now for 8 months using the system. And then the other cool piece of it, next slide. Okay, this is a cool piece, but not the one I was thinking of. So this is what the case management login looks like. So you are given a user ID and a password. You log in. We can assign you to certain cases. You can bring those people up. You can look at all of the information about them. I'm not sure why the slide is so blurry. It's the initial intake, which is comes from that public registration page. Then there's an assessment that goes into a lot more detail about what their income level is, and languages that they speak, and other things that are important. There's the recovery planning, so that for long-term recovery, they can develop a plan. The clients can see it, and they can kind of keep track of their milestones as they're moving back toward recovery. There's referrals, and I'll get to that in a second. There's the advocacy, so anything that has to do with FEMA applications or insurance advocacy, you can view the status of any of their claims. And then I can't read the last one. Anyway, there's a lot. It's very powerful. Okay, this is the part that I think is cool. Anyone that has resources, so maybe you don't want to be involved with being part of Vision Link, but you can tell us that you have resources available, And we can put those resources into the system so that those that are looking through the cases can see what's available to the clients. They can refer the client to you, and then you can provide the resources that you want. Then we hope that you, and there are two ways to do that. You can either have a user account, log in, say that you've spoken to this person, that you chose to give them the resource or not, and then it's all still in one place. Or you can just send an email outside of the system if you don't want to pay the $35 a month user fee. And that user fee is only for the months that you are actually working in the system. So it could be a month, 2 months, or it could be ongoing. If it was a disaster, I'm hoping that we would get funding to help you with that. Next slide. There are additional modules, one for construction and rebuilding, which Santa Cruz is starting to use right now to keep track of all of the building permits and who's working on systems, who they can put in if they're not getting along or they're having problems with certain construction companies, so that they can be marked to do not use for the future. So we own that piece. We do not own the volunteer management or the donations management pieces yet, but we want to at least get the volunteer management, for the one main reason is that in there, any organization can track their volunteer hours in a way that our government partners will be able to use it to offset their costs during the disaster. For reimbursement and working with FEMA and the state, I'm trying to remember how it works now. I haven't talked about this for about 6 months. So the FEMA will pay 75% of the costs and leaves 25% for local government to pick up. But then the state will pick up 75% of the 25%, which leaves around 18% that the local government is going to have to pay. But for every volunteer hour and the dollar value of those volunteer hours, they get to reduce that 18%. So it could get to the point where they don't have to pay anything out of pocket for the disaster, which would be amazing. Next slide. Security in the system is really, really good. We issue the permissions ourselves, and so you only get to see what you're authorized to see and no more, so that we can make sure that people's personal identifying information is kept secure. If you're an organization that works in multiple counties, you only have to have one user account, and we can assign you disasters in multiple counties. So it's actually very cost effective, and to use one system in multiple counties, which we're offering it to anyone that has a disaster, because we paid all of the upfront fees, and we partnered with Santa Cruz County's long-term recovery group and the Santa Cruz Community Foundation. We split the cost of setting the system up, which was kind of pricey, and nobody else needs to do it now because there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. Next. So what we need to do now that we've built it, now we need to have some planning discussions on how to use it, and we want to hear all of the feedback on what you don't like about it, what you do like about it, how to minimize the cost and still be able to have the best service for the clients. So we'd like to create a short-term task force to discuss how to use it. We'll give you an overview of the system. You can critique it. We can modify the content, and then talk about, as Araceli said, maybe we have some case workers that can pivot when the disaster happens. Maybe each organization decides they want to have one that's able to jump right into the system when the disaster happens and start reaching out to people before they scatter off to counties all across California. But that really is, what do you want it to be? And so we will be sending out a notice to solicit information and invite you to a couple of discussion meetings so that we can work this out and be able to just flip the switch when the next disaster happens and provide amazing customer service to our community. Next slide. I already mentioned it's $35 per person to use it, so it's super cheap to use, to have access and be able to have our clients only have to tell their story once, and then it can be shared with everyone that that needs to know it. It does have the ability to import and export spreadsheets of data and all kinds of reports. All of the reports that FEMA needs can be printed out of it. CADRE can provide training on how to use the case management system, and it can be used actually for any case management. We could, if you had a program, we didn't have this really in place during COVID, unfortunately, but in the future we could, as part of the task force, discuss if it could be used for short-term things like rental assistance. And we could create a separate incident where those that were helping with rental assistance could all go in and see who's getting paid and what kind of assistance is being offered. So it has a lot of potential for the same cost. Now that we have it, we can use it as much as we want. Okay, and so if you have questions about that, that's my cell phone number, or you can email me, but we will be reaching out to actually have some planning meetings to figure out the best way to use this cool tool that we finally have. All right.
Great, thank you, Marcia. And I'm seeing some comments in the chat box. Those of you who are, if you'd like to give us your thoughts, if you know you want to be a part of this work group now, just put some information in the chat box and we can get you right at the top of the list. In the interest of time, we are running out. I am going to launch our participant poll, which keeps our funders happy for CADRE offering the session. So I'm going to hit launch. There's just 3 questions for you to answer today, if you wouldn't mind. I'm putting up on your screen what our session objectives were when we started out this morning, to help you gain a broad understanding of long-term recovery, to talk about and understand the differences in disaster case management, social services case management, and hold on, my cursor doesn't want to work. Talk about how things are handled here in Santa Clara County, and learn about Vision Link. So you'll give us your thoughts on how well we've succeeded in our session objectives today. We hope you enjoyed today's program and learned something that you can apply for your own organization's disaster planning. We invite you to actively engage with us at CADRE to help strengthen our community's response capabilities and our coordination efforts as your local VOAD. And with that, we kept you 1 minute extra, but thank you for being with us this morning. And please do, if you have thoughts and questions that are still in your mind, please use the chat box or hang out with us. We'll stay on the line with you and you can unmute and chat with us. But thank you for today's program, to all of our speakers and presenters, and thank you to all of you as participants for joining us this morning.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.